What would you do if someone you trusted turned a quiet afternoon on your ranch into a nightmare? The sun hung low over the rolling hills of my Wyoming ranch, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and freshly cut hay, a familiar comfort that had grounded me through years of hard work and solitude. My service dog, Ranger, a German shepherd with soulful brown eyes, padded beside me as we walked the fence line. Ranger wasn't just a pet, was my lifeline, trained to sense the panic attacks that crept up from my PTSD, a remnant of my time in the service. His steady presence kept me whole. That day, though, the peace we'd built was about to shatter. Karen lived on the neighboring property, a sprawling estate she'd bought after some corporate windfall. She was the kind of person who wore her wealth like a badge, her designer boots always pristine despite the muddy trails around here. At first, she'd seemed friendly enough chatty, always stopping by with a bottle of wine or a story about her city life. I'd let her into my world, even invited her to the ranch for coffee, thinking she was just another soul looking for a fresh start in the country. But there was always something off about her, a sharpness in her eyes that made Ranger's ears twitch. It started with small things. Karen complained about my fences, claiming they blocked her view. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes about my cattle straying too close to her land, though they never did. I brushed it off, chalking it up to her being new to ranch life. But then she started fixating on Ranger. "Why's that dog always with you?" she'd ask, her tone dripping with disdain. "He's too big for a house pet." I'd explain he was a service dog, vital to my mental health, but she'd just smirk and change the subject. I didn't realize then that her questions weren't curiosity, they were resentment, bubbling under the surface. The day it all went to hell started like any other. I was repairing a gate near the property line when Karen's SUV roared up, kicking up dust. Ranger, sensing my unease, stayed close, his ears perked. Karen stepped out, her face flushed, a canister of pepper spray dangling from her hand like a weapon. "Your dog's been barking all night," she snapped, though Ranger hadn't made a sound. "He's scaring my horses." "Karen, he's trained. He doesn't bark unless there's a reason," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Maybe your horses are spooked by something else." Her eyes narrowed, and I saw it then, the glint of something unhinged. "You think you're so perfect out here, don't you?" she spat. "You and that mangy mutt, acting like you own this valley." Her words stung, but I held my ground. Ranger growled low, sensing the shift in her tone. "Karen, go home. We can talk later," I said, turning back to the gate. That's when I heard the hiss of the spray. Ranger yelped, a sound that ripped through me like a knife. I spun around to see him pawing at his face, his eyes streaming as he staggered back. Karen stood there, canister raised, a twisted smile on her face. "That'll teach him," she said. Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, rushing to Ranger's side. He whimpered, disoriented, his trust in the world shaken. I grabbed a water bottle from my pack and flushed his eyes, my hands trembling. Karen just watched, unapologetic. "You're overreacting," she said. "It's just a dog. Just a dog." My voice shook with fury. "He's my service dog, Karen. You just committed a federal crime." Her smile faltered, but only for a moment. She scoffed, tossing her hair. "Good luck proving that. It's my word against yours." But she didn't know me. I wasn't just some rancher she could bully. I'd spent years in the military, learning to stay calm under fire, to document everything. My security cameras, installed after a string of cattle thefts, had caught the whole thing. I called the sheriff, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Karen tried to drive off, but I blocked her SUV with my truck, standing firm as she screamed about lawsuits and her rights. The sheriff arrived within the hour, a grizzled man named Tom who'd known me since I was a kid. He watched the footage in silence, his jaw tightening as Ranger's yelp echoed from the screen. Karen's bravado crumbled as he cuffed her, reading her rights. "Tampering with a service animal is a federal offense, ma'am," he said. "You're coming with me." As they drove away, I knelt beside Ranger, who was still shaking but starting to recover. I buried my face in his fur, whispering apologies for a world that could be so cruel. But the fight wasn't over. Karen's arrest was just the beginning spark that would ignite a firestorm in our small community. Word spread fast. By morning, my ranch was a circus. Reporters from the local paper showed up, snapping photos of the fence line where it happened. Neighbors took sides, some stood by me. Others whispered that I'd provoked Karen, that Ranger must have done something to deserve it. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice for Ranger and Karen behind bars. I hated the attention, but I couldn't let Karen's actions slide. She'd crossed a line, not just against me or Ranger, but against the trust that holds a community together. The legal battle was brutal. Karen's lawyer painted her as a victim, claiming she'd acted in self-defense against a dangerous animal. She had the money to drag it out, hiring experts to question Ranger's training and my mental health. I sat in court, listening to her lies, my hands clenched so tight they ached. But the evidence was undeniable. The video showed her unprovoked attack, and Ranger's medical records proved the damage: temporary blindness, weeks of anxiety. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a soft spot for dogs, didn't buy Karen's story. She sentenced her to 6 months in federal prison and a hefty fine, citing the Americans with Disabilities Act. Victory should have felt good, but it didn't. The ranch, once my sanctuary, felt tainted. Ranger was healing, but he wasn't the same. He flinched at sudden movements now, his trust fractured. And the community, it was split down the middle. Some saw Karen as a monster. Others saw her as a misunderstood woman pushed too far. I couldn't walk into town without whispers following me. Months passed, and I tried to rebuild. Ranger and I took long walks at dawn, avoiding the property line where Karen's estate sat empty to put it up for sale after the trial. But the weight of it all lingered. I'd won in court, but at what cost? My peace was gone, replaced by a bitter truth. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the porch with Ranger at my side. The air was cool, the world quiet except for the distant call of a hawk. I thought about Karen, alone in her cell, and wondered if she felt the weight of what she'd done. I wanted to believe in redemption, in second chances, but some wounds cut too deep. Ranger rested his head on my knee, his eyes steady despite everything. He was still here, still fighting. And so was I. But the story doesn't end there. Karen's release was coming, and with it, rumors she'd be back, angrier than ever. I didn't know what she'd do next, but I knew one thing. I'd protect Ranger, no matter the cost. Because in a world full of Karens, sometimes all you have is the loyalty of those who stand by you and the strength to keep going, even when it hurts. The months after Karen's sentencing were a blur of routine and unease. The ranch demanded my attention: calves to tag, fences to mend, hay to bale, but every task felt heavier now. Ranger stayed close, his recovery slow but steady. The vet said his eyes were healing, but the spark in them had dulled. He'd always been fearless, alerting me to danger or calming my panic attacks with a nudge of his nose. Now, he hesitated at the sound of a car engine or the creak of a gate. I hated Karen for that, for stealing his confidence. But hate doesn't fix what's broken, and I had to keep moving forward. The community was still fractured. At the feed store, old friends avoided my gaze, while others clapped me on the back, calling me a hero for standing up to that city woman. The local diner became a battleground of opinions. Some said Karen got what she deserved. Others grumbled that I'd ruined her life over just a dog. I stopped going to town unless I had to. The ranch was my refuge, but even that felt tainted. Karen's estate loomed across the valley, its for sale sign a constant reminder of the fight that had torn us apart. I tried to focus on Ranger's training, reteaching him to trust the world. We'd walk the trails at dawn, just the two of us, the quiet broken only by the crunch of gravel and the chirp of sparrows. I talked to him silly things about the weather or the cattle, and sometimes he'd tilt his head like he understood. Those moments kept me grounded, but the shadow of Karen's release hung over us. She was due out in a month, and rumors swirled that she wasn't done with me. A neighbor claimed she'd heard Karen's lawyer talking about a civil suit, something about defamation or emotional distress. I didn't know what to believe, but I wasn't taking chances. I upgraded the security cameras and started carrying a phone on me at all times, just in case. One morning, as I was checking the mailbox, a beat-up sedan pulled up. A woman stepped out, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. "You're the one with the dog, right?" she asked. I nodded, wary. She introduced herself as Lila, Karen's cousin from Cheyenne. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly. "I just want to understand what happened. Karen's family were struggling with this." I didn't know her anything, but something in her voice, genuine, maybe desperate, made me listen. We sat on the porch, Ranger at my feet, and I told her everything. The complaints, the pepper spray, the trial. Lila listened, her face tightening when I described Ranger's pain. "Karen never mentioned the cameras," she said softly. "She told us the dog attacked her, that you set her up." I showed her the footage on my phone, the same clip that had damned Karen in court. Lila's eyes welled up as Ranger's yelp echoed. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "She's always been intense, but I didn't think she'd go this far." Lila's visit stirred something in me, anger, but also pity. Karen wasn't just a villain. She was a person, flawed and broken like the rest of us. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. Lila left with a promise to talk to Karen's family, maybe get her help when she got out. I didn't hold my breath, but it was a flicker of hope in a mess that felt endless. The day Karen was released, I stayed on the ranch, half expecting her to show up with a lawyer or worse. But the day passed quietly, and so did the next. Her estate sold to a quiet couple from Colorado, and for a while it seemed like the storm had passed. Ranger was getting better, wagging his tail more, and I started to believe we could move on. Then the letter arrived. It was handwritten, no return address. Karen's scrawl was unmistakable. "You think you won," it read, "but this isn't over. You took everything from me. Watch your back." My stomach churned. I called the sheriff, who promised to look into it, but without a direct threat, there wasn't much he could do. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing with what she might do next. Ranger sensed my fear, pressing his body against mine as if to say he'd protect me. But I was the one who had to protect him. A week later, I woke to the smell of smoke. I bolted outside, Ranger barking wildly. The barn was ablaze, flames licking the sky. I called 911, then grabbed a hose, fighting the fire until the volunteer fire department arrived. By the time they put it out, half the barn was gone, along with a season's worth of hay. The fire chief found traces of accelerant gasoline. Arson. My first thought was Karen, but there was no proof. The cameras hadn't caught anyone, and she'd been seen in town that night, miles away. The sheriff questioned her, but she played innocent, all tears and indignation. I knew it was her, though. I felt it in my gut. The fire was the breaking point. I'd fought for justice, for Ranger, for my way of life, but at what cost? My savings were drained from legal fees, my ranch was scarred, and Ranger's recovery had stalled again. The community was no better. Neighbors who'd once shared coffee now picked sides, some even blaming me for escalating things. "If you just ignored her," one said, "none of this would have happened." I wanted to scream that I hadn't started this, that Karen had crossed a line, but words felt useless against the weight of it all. I started questioning myself. Had I pushed too hard? Could I have de-escalated things before they spiraled? Ranger was alive, and Karen had faced consequences, but the victory felt hollow. The ranch, once my haven, was a battlefield of memories I couldn't escape. I thought about selling, starting over somewhere new, but the thought of leaving felt like giving up. This land was my home, my family's legacy, and Ranger deserved better than to run from a fight we hadn't started. One evening, I got a call from Lila. Karen had moved to Denver, she said, and was in therapy, though she wasn't sure it was helping. "She's angry," Lila admitted, "but I think she's starting to see what she did was wrong." I didn't know if I believed that, but it was something. Lila offered to pay for part of the barn repairs, a gesture from Karen's family. I refused money wouldn't undo the damage, but I thanked her. It was the first time I felt a glimmer of closure, however faint. As winter set in, I rebuilt the barn with help from a few loyal neighbors. Ranger started to heal again, his tail wagging when we worked the cattle. The community was still divided, but the whispers were fading. I learned to live with the scars on the ranch, on Ranger, on me. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours and we'd fought for it. Looking back, I don't know if justice was served. Karen paid a price, but so did I. The real cost wasn't the barn or the legal fees. It was the trust we all lost in neighbors, in fairness, in the idea that doing right would make things right. Ranger taught me to keep going, though. His loyalty, his quiet strength, reminded me that some bonds can't be broken, no matter how hard the world tries. This story isn't just my nights, about all of us. About how quickly a spark of anger can burn everything down, and how hard it is to rebuild. I don't have all the answers. Was I right to fight so hard? Was Karen a monster, or just a woman who lost her way? What does justice mean when everyone's hurting? I'd love to hear what you think. Share your thoughts about right and wrong, about community, about what you'd do if it was your dog, your home, your fight. Because in the end, it's our stories and the way we tell them that keep us connected.